most people are depleted in all their minerals. And this is important because the minerals are like the spark plugs of life, the spark plugs for your hormones, spark plugs for your brain, everything, your motivation, your all the things. And she said, but it's because our soil is so depleted that our food doesn't even get all the nutrients it's supposed to get to feed you. And she was like, if you're not supplementing vitamins and minerals, then you're probably deficient, and that's going to show up. I know that a lot of women are dealing with things like weight gain, brain fog, fatigue, digestive issues, and you go to the doctor and the blood work comes back fine, the analysis comes back fine, the scans come back fine, and they're like, oh, it must be stress. And that's essentially what everyone is walking away with. But intuitively, we're like, no, something else is going on. What is going on with my body?
Hi, you're listening to Java with Jen with your host, Jenna Lee Samuel. On this show, I bring the simplicity of hearing God's voice into everyday life in a no-nonsense, authentic, and super practical way. With coffee in hand and real life in our faces, let's do this.
Thanks so much for joining me for another episode here at Java with Jen. I have a new friend with me, Michelle McCoy. Now, you guys know I am a natural health girl, and as women approaching 40, a lot of you listeners are in different age brackets, but a lot of us, either you'll get to this point, or you went through this point, or you're there. We can live with some struggles sometimes that we don't realize there are solutions for. And one area that Michelle dives into is high functioning fatigue. For some people, maybe it looks like brain fog. For some people, it's literally this constant sense of exhaustion. And I'm going to let her, as the expert, get into what that looks like. But I wanted to have her on here because this is just really relevant. And she has a passion, and she feels like a mandate from the Lord to help women get healthy and get the most out of their lives. God is the author of life and abundant life. And so we're going to tackle this, dive in deep, and hopefully give you guys some tools that will improve your quality of life. So Michelle, it's so good to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Jen. It's such an honor to be on your amazing show and just talk with you about this really important topic.
Absolutely. So I just think it's fun every time you and I get talking, we're like, forget recording, let's just talk, because there's so many things in this lane that we can talk about that I know my life has been changed by exploring natural health. And again, as we go into this to my listeners, I don't want you to ever feel like we're shaming anyone or anything that are more in traditional medicine as far as America is concerned, of like going to doctors, using medicine, doing that route, because there's a time and place for the both. But I do believe that there's so much wisdom in pursuing natural methods because God is the author of life, and he created both our bodies to heal themselves and nature to heal us. I mean, he's put all the tools that we need. So it's more about discovering them. But let me tell you guys a little bit about Michelle first, so you know a little more who she is. She is a high functioning fatigue expert, a board certified holistic and functional health coach, and host of the Treasured Wellness Christian podcast. So if you want to learn more about this topic, you're going to want to watch her podcast, listen to her podcast. Michelle helps driven Christian women in midlife to break free from their high functioning fatigue and feel more energized. She's using individualized targeted support combined with renewed biblical mindset shifts. She teaches women to treasure their temple in a way that fits their lifestyle for a life of wellness. God called Michelle to pursue holistic health when conventional medicine failed her sick daughter. Living out a health crisis herself brought her even closer to her purpose. She learned to turn to the one who created her for healing and restoration, for autoimmunity, and a debilitating fatigue condition. Michelle is happily married to her best friend of 32 years. They have 2 adult children and their spouses and 3 grand dogs. Michelle and her husband are currently thriving during this phase of living in an empty nest. And so, Michelle, I had another guest on the show, Mrs. America, a few months ago, and it's interesting. She got into functional health because the traditional medical system failed her. And I would say the traditional medical system has failed me too, working through what's going on in my body. Why am I gaining weight? Why do I not feel like myself, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that's where a lot of people kind of end up pivoting and looking more into natural health. Like, what pieces are missing? Why is the medical system failing me? And so maybe talk a little bit about that briefly. Like, how did you get here? Talk a little bit about those health crises you guys were experiencing, and what made you pivot from traditional medicine into holistic?
Yeah, absolutely. And you are so right. We need to have a blend between conventional and holistic medicine or conventional and natural medicine, right? And so often that's what I do with my clients is I'm helping to bridge the gap, help to answer the questions and unpeel the layer of the onion.
Yeah.
But 21 years ago, when our daughter was so sick, it took 3 years for us to find out what was wrong with her. And
Wow.
no child, no person should have to suffer for 3 years without getting an answer.
Yeah.
And so I literally had to leave the state and find a holistic practitioner that would help me help her. And one of the things is that, we did all the testing, we did everything. She had CAT scans, she was having severe migraines, skin conditions, and gut issues. So one of the things that was happening was they were just medicating her. They were just, putting her on these really high dose medications for like anti-seizure and different things that first weren't helping. And secondly, we didn't know what the ramifications of those medications would be.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I break my leg, absolutely, I'm going to see a specialist for that. But they were looking at my daughter for just her symptom.
Yeah.
And so they were just looking at her like her head, her brain, right? They weren't looking at her as a whole person. And
Mhm.
this is where holistic and functional medicine comes in. You are looking at the person as a whole and
Yeah.
you're not compartmentalizing their symptoms. You're not just chasing symptoms.
Yeah.
Once we discovered what was wrong with her, then I was ready to rock and roll and I was able to really help her with her healing process. And but one thing I have to say is every time I asked a doctor
Mhm.
if food had something to do with why she was so sick, every single doctor said no. Food has nothing to do with it. Feed this little girl whatever she wants. She doesn't feel well. Well,
Bless.
that was really sweet, right?
Right.
However, it was not helping the problem. And I was essentially poisoning her with the food I was giving her
Oh.
once I found that out, after 3 years. So, you know, then around the same timeline, I was going through my own first health crisis and it was a fatigue crisis.
Mhm.
And so I just kept pushing that on the back burner because I was putting all my efforts into her. And then, like moms do.
Yeah.
And so then fast forward several more years, I went through a second fatigue crisis, and that was where my adrenals were like about depleted. I was like below the flatline line. And so,
Okay, so how did that show up in your life? How did you know you were in a crisis?
yeah, so I was struggling with extreme fatigue, that feeling of being hit by a bus,
Mhm.
especially when I would first wake up, I was just like very, very tired, even though I might have slept through the night. Around 2, 3 o'clock, forget it. I was almost falling asleep at the wheel,
Mhm.
and I had to be really, really careful of, my driving and I was reaching for caffeine, I was reaching for sugar, I was reaching for anything to help give me that quick boost so I could get through
Yeah.
my workday.
Mm.
And I was also having some other really strange symptoms that I thought were something else.
Mm.
So, for instance, I was having really bad heart palpitations. And so I had my heart checked, I had an EKG, I went through all the traditional steps. Nothing was wrong with my heart, but there was still something wrong. I was
Yeah.
also having problems with dizziness. I was having like weakness, my arms, I just felt like I was walking through quicksand. I mean, it's like a slow fade, right? And
Hmm.
where you get to a depletion point.
Yeah.
But in true form, I kept pushing through, getting things done. So there was a lot of symptoms. I know when I hit bottom,
Mhm.
I was at the point where I had to lay down 3 times a day.
Mhm.
Whether I took a nap or not, that wasn't the point. It was just I had to lay down to get my nervous system back into
Wow.
balance.
Wow.
I couldn't finish cooking without turning everything off at dinner and having to go lay down. And then,
Mm.
okay, I feel better after 15 minutes and get back up and finish. The weakness was crazy.
Yeah.
The dizziness, like it was pretty rough. And so I mean, all of that brought me into like obviously our daughter's story got me really excited about holistic nutrition,
Yeah.
but God just weaved it through her story, my story, where he said, no, it's time for you to go back to
Mhm.
school and go for nutrition specifically. So
As
I
you're so tired.
Well, and that was during my, that was later on, like when I had kind of recovered
Oh,
from
good.
a little bit. But honestly, nutrition school is what helped me recover because I was like, oh my gosh, all these things are making sense. Like, I was my own guinea pig. And so I did a bunch of changes and I was like, this is amazing.
Wow.
There really is power in food. Food
Yeah.
is medicine or poison, Hippocrates said, and it's so true.
It's
So,
so true.
yeah.
So, okay, so I appreciate you saying this because I actually just finished doing all the labs like Mrs. America I had on here a few months ago. We just went through my labs. So I did all these functional medicine labs, like the hair mineral analysis, hormones, food sensitivities, like all the things. And what we learned about me was that, to simplify, I am like depleted in all my minerals. There was a few other things going on, but one of the major ones was I was depleted in all my minerals. And I asked her, I was like, why am I so low? She goes, most people are depleted in all their minerals. And this is important because the minerals are like the spark plugs of life, the spark plugs for your hormones, spark plugs for your brain, everything, your motivation, your all the things. And she said, but it's because our soil is so depleted that our food doesn't even get all the nutrients it's supposed to get to feed you. And she was like, if you're not supplementing vitamins and minerals, then you're probably deficient and that's going to show up. And so talk to us a little bit because I know that a lot of women, especially I feel like all of my peers, are dealing with things like weight gain, brain fog, fatigue, and like so many of those different things, and some of them digestive issues. And you go to the doctor and the blood work comes back fine, the analysis comes back fine, the scans come back fine, and they're like, oh, it must be stress. And that's essentially what everyone is walking away with. But intuitively, we're like, no, something else is going on. What is going on with my body? And so how do you help women, like when they come to you and they start telling you their symptoms? Are there like key things that you're like, okay, these are the foundations that we know are commonly the issue, like that we have to check these boxes to be clear that we're getting all the foundational problems addressed? Are there some like common factors that people can be addressing?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, you want to test to find out what's really going on. What is your body telling you? Because so often our body is telling us, but are we listening? There's
Mm-hmm.
so much noise around us, noise in the world, and we have to get quiet and really listen to what our body is telling us. And so,
Mm-hmm.
to your point, certain testing might need to happen, whether it's, blood, urine, saliva, hair mineral, but there's a lot that you can go to your doctor and you'll get proper testing done and they come back and they say your labs are normal, everything is fine. Let's talk about the woman who's going through maybe perimenopause and she's feeling a whole lot of fatigue and brain fog. And her labs look normal,
Mm-hmm.
but she still is exhausted and she's having trouble thinking. Well, first, I want to say just because something is common doesn't mean it's normal.
Thank you.
Right. So, so many women are walking away, scratching their head, feeling like they have more questions than answers because they're like, well, I'm doing all the things. I'm eating well, I'm exercising, I'm getting my labs done. Everything says fine. I'm fine, which I don't like that word fine.
Mm-hmm.
And why do I not feel good? What is wrong with me? Right. And then you start thinking, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get it together? So we want to address a few things. I like to get back to the basics. Let's
Mm-hmm.
just get back to the basics and keep it really simple. We're not going to start all of this stuff all at once because that's very much like diet mentality
Mm-hmm.
and diets don't work.
Yeah.
So we really need to get dialed into what do you need? What is your body telling you?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes just through nutritional changes, lifestyle changes, simplification of what you're doing, mindset shifts, you will give your body what it naturally needs to
Mm-hmm.
heal and repair. The body was brilliantly designed
Yeah.
and it knows how to heal and repair if we give it the proper tools and support.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of on us to find out, keep digging,
Yeah.
keep searching and have that intentionality because our body's a temple of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And so God designed designed us to be in health, to be well.
It's true.
And so it's really very individual, Jen. Like each client comes to me, like when I'm working with one person, I'll be doing something different. There are some things that are across the board, of course. Drink more water. You might think you're drinking enough water, drink a little bit more. You might not be drinking as much as you think.
How about that hydrogen water? I've been seeing that's a whole thing. Is that a thing? Should people buy the hydrogen water bottles?
It is a thing, but it's not necessary. I mean, it's
Okay.
like $400. I mean,
Oh,
it's like crazy. Like it's not necessary, but I will tell you what is necessary. You need to make sure you are getting enough minerals, like you said, to your point. And we are. The soil is absolutely deficient and depleted of nutrients and minerals. So you want to be sure that you are getting enough. And so a simple little thing, put a pinch of Celtic sea salt in your water. You
yeah.
know, squeeze fresh lemon in there. You're getting some electrolytes, you're getting some minerals, you're getting some vitamin C. You're
Yeah.
getting these things that are really going to help you with your energy in a natural way
Yeah.
and a very affordable way too. And so these little tweaks can really help you to move the needle forward, but we don't want to like throw the baby out with the bathwater and do everything all at once. And then we feel overwhelmed and confused. And for one thing, what's really working? If you're doing a bunch of supplementation, what's really working?
Yeah.
So I guess I would say go with less is more. Let's start slow and build on it so
Yeah.
that each day, each week, you're doing better, you're feeling better, you're seeing results, you're feeling results. And then you're like, okay, this is working. This is what my body needs. And then you can just keep building on that.
Yeah, that's so good. I know it's kind of become like I have heard from so many people, doctors included, when I'm like, okay, I feel like my thyroid is struggling, my hormones are out of whack. And then, so, my mom was literally in menopause by the time that she was maybe 6 months to a year older than I am now. So I realize I'm probably coming up on that and apparently very young, apparently young for that. But it drives me crazy when I hear people say, oh, it's just part of aging. It's just part of aging. Because my thought as a believer is God didn't design us to just deteriorate, right? Which, I mean, I don't know. If you look at the whole stem cell thing, as we age, we do lose stem cells, and stem cells are what heal and repair your body. So that's why I'm using these patches now. But so there is an aspect of certain things your body used to be able to do younger, it can't do as you age because it doesn't have the same tools. However, I don't believe that it's God's design that we should live in a constant state of I can't function. I do think that our broken food system and broken medical system exacerbate the problem. My functional health doctor did tell me, she was like, start putting salt, like sea salt, Celtic, whatever, pink Himalayan, the things in your water. And so I went home and that day I put like 4 cranks of that salt in my lemon. And I'm telling you, it tasted barely salty. It was so satisfying. I did it 3 times that day. And I was like, this is hitting the spot so well. Well, now I can only do 2 cranks of salt because my body apparently is like, it's enough, I'm good.
Exactly.
And so it did. It helped a lot. Like it just helped a lot. So anyways, okay, let's dive into some of these other questions that I had for you. You told me that we're dealing with the first generation of children who will not outlive their parents. So can you explain that? Because I was shocked when you said that, when you said we're dealing with the first generation of children that on this current trajectory will not outlive their parents. That to me is a generational crisis. Like what in the world? Help me understand that.
It is. And it's so emotional just to even hear you say that, even though, I said that to you. But the reality is children are being diagnosed with adult diseases and adult conditions as young as 6, 7, 8 years old. And this is not really new. It's actually been studied since the early 2000s, I believe. So it's just a trend that is getting worse and worse and worse. Diabetes, fatty liver, obesity. Why is this happening? And if they aren't, because I don't ever want it to be across the board, and I can't remember. I feel like it was like Jamie Oliver who first said this, who I learned this from, but then I've heard other practitioners talk about it as well. So I apologize. I can't really recall, but I don't, even if that's true or not true, if children are living longer than their parents, are they living in good health?
Right.
Are they living healthy lives? They might be living longer, but with high obesity rates, the amount of screen time that our kids are subject to dealing with, their brains constantly on high alert. It's a critical time too when kids are growing, their brains are growing, and they're constantly having the blue light and the stimulation overload. That's not good.
No.
And so kids are getting really just sicker and unhealthier.
Mm-hmm.
And it all can be changed. I mean,
Yeah.
by the way, about 90, maybe even 95% by now of all diabetics are type 2. So type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease and it
Mm-hmm.
absolutely can be reversed.
Yeah.
So this is a really, really big deal
Yeah.
because it's affecting our children. And we know that Satan is attacking our children. Satan is attacking the family unit. He is
Yeah.
attacking our marriages. So, and he's attacking women even more specifically, I feel like, lately. And so this is a really, really big deal. And as daughters of the king, we are the heartbeat of our homes.
Yeah.
Everything that we learn and do trickles down beautifully into the family unit.
Mm-hmm.
So, whether you have littles at home or you are a new empty nester, your family's watching.
Yeah.
And so, it's a great responsibility, but it's also an amazing privilege that the Lord has given us
Mm-hmm.
to help shape that generation of health.
Yeah. It's so true. And it's important that we as women get the revelation of being health minded because like I have 4 boys, right? And my youngest still eats eats crap. Like, and I put healthy food in front of him and he just always finds a way, especially when my back is turned, he finds the sodas and the candies and the crap food. Literally to the point I'm praying. I'm like, God, please, I need you to help him in this area. And but it gave me comfort because my older boys, I feel like they all hit this point where they suddenly had a revelation about the need to pursue healthy disciplines. And it's usually they wanted to lose some weight because they had gotten chubby and girls came on the scene. So now they started carrying, right? So I'm like, praise God, bring the girls, you know. But one of my friends, my boys had stayed the night at their house. They're like an aunt and uncle, basically. And she wasn't feeling good. And she goes, I laughed because your boys sounded just like you because they were like, well, have you been drinking enough water? Well, you need some essential oils and you need this. And they were trying to like fix the problem with all the tools that I've been giving them. And
I love it.
I'm like, praise God, they are walking away with some healthy concepts. And so
Yeah.
now the older brothers have started to give the younger brother a hard time because they're like, well, you don't feel good because you're always eating dessert and trash food. You need to feed your body healthy stuff. And so I'm like, okay, ladies, just take heart. If you are persistent, they are hearing what you're saying. But
They are.
what are some ways that we as moms, like just simple practical stuff, because it to me it feels like no matter how hard I try, he's finding sugar and trash food everywhere I'm not. You know what I mean? Like he goes and spends the night at a friend's house and they're eating cake for dinner. You know, he goes to church and they're giving out candy bars as rewards or you know what I mean? It's like some girls at church like brought my kid a Starbucks drink. They were doing it every week, the big one. And I'm like, that's 100 grams of sugar. Stop giving my kid that drink. Like, and so it's like no matter where I turn, I feel like I'm having to fight off lions of diseasing food because it's just everywhere. And so what can we as moms do? I know that sounds a little dramatic. Sorry. I'll chill out. But I just feel like as moms, it can be exhausting and frustrating. Like, how do we teach our kids to enjoy healthier food and have what are some of the most important things to teach them without it being over the top and impossible? You know, I'm not going to go buy all organic food. I just can't.
Yeah, there's so much right there, Jen, I could unpack, but I want to keep it simple. And
Simple.
you don't have to buy all organic food. And just a little tip too, if it has a peel, then you don't necessarily have to get organic. And I know, the soil is still depleted, the seed can be GMO. I understand all of that. But with the idea of simplicity and not having overwhelm, let's start where we can start, right?
Yeah.
Meet yourself where you're at and don't think that you have to do everything all at once. Listen, when I teach in my program, I do a pantry and fridge makeover. I teach it way smarter than the way I did it myself years ago. My poor child came home from college, his first weekend home from college, and he's like, there's nothing to eat because I had gone on a rampage
Mhm.
and I got rid of 5 or 6 bags of like high fructose corn syrup and all this stuff. And then I sat at my bar after I threw all that stuff out and I just cried because I'm like, what do I do now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was too much. And
Yeah.
so you want to start where you're at and you just want to build on it. So let's say high fructose corn syrup. If you have barbecue sauce and ketchup with high fructose corn syrup, the next time you go to the store to buy some, get it without.
Mhm.
And you're just making these little easy shifts in what you're preparing, buying, all of that. Healthier snacks, they're still crunchy. Kids want crunch. They want individual. They want, just changing things up. If you bake a lot, cut half the amount of sugar that you put in your baked goods. Nobody will miss it.
Yeah.
Little tweaks, adding more fiber and more protein into your baked goods like chia seed, flax seed, hemp seed, all super easy to
Mhm.
just add that in. And you're not even really noticing, to be
Yeah.
honest. I mean, maybe the chia seeds, depending on what you're making, because they like to get stuck in your teeth. But, you just want to make these simple little tweaks. But as you are doing this for yourself,
Mhm.
your kids are watching. And
Yeah.
as you're just naturally making these little shifts, like, maybe let's say you want to start introducing gluten-free options and you guys have a spaghetti dinner every Friday night, then you're just simply getting the gluten-free pasta and you can start by blending it with the regular pasta so it's
Oh.
not quite a shock. That's what I did
Mhm.
when we started doing gluten-free. And then over time, you're doing more and more of the gluten-free until it's all gluten-free pasta.
Smart.
It's just these little tweaks so that you don't feel overwhelmed as a mom. You're
Yeah.
not like, and you don't have to make 2 different meals for everybody. My goodness, nobody has time for that.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing I did when our daughter we realized she had a gluten allergy, was I was making 2 meals. And this was
Yeah.
20 years ago. And so it was
That's exhausting.
a mess. It was a mess. And I was like, I should have put everybody on a gluten-free nutrition plan, but it was expensive back then. But
Mhm.
what I did was I learned how to bake really, really well, finding out the flour, regulations, all of that stuff. Now it's so easy. You go
Uh-huh.
get Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1 baking flour, not a problem. It's super
Yeah.
easy. Nobody's going to notice that it's gluten-free. So just these little tweaks to make it simple for yourself.
I love what you just said because when I first started learning, because like I said earlier in the episode, like I wasn't raised natural health. I was raised, you check your brain at the door and just do what the doctor says. I was raised that on family nights, my parents would buy us each a half gallon of ice cream, and we would each eat our own half gallon of ice cream watching a movie. And it was like an unspoken competition, see who could finish their half gallon. Like that was my health training in my home, right? And so when the Lord shifted us and was like, it started with have your babies at home. Like, hi, that's kind of a jump, right? But it got me on this train of understanding health and the body and all this stuff. So one of the first changes I made was I cut out any foods in my pantry that were had partially hydrogenated oils in them. That's where I
Yeah.
started. And that was pretty simple to do, like just to pull those out.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, so let's shift over. I'm like, I want to make sure we cover some of this other stuff. So you talk about that you help women who deal with that. There's 3 types of fatigue, and that you help women with these different types of fatigue. So help us with that, because there's not just physical fatigue, there's emotional fatigue and spiritual fatigue, I'm guessing. And so talk about those. How do women know if that's what they're dealing with? Because maybe they're thinking they're dealing with physical fatigue, but it's actually a spiritual fatigue they're dealing with. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, fatigue is huge. Fatigue is huge. And I was just talking with somebody yesterday who thought, she goes, well, I'm in the season. Aren't I supposed to be tired until I get through menopause?
Oh no.
Get through menopause? No,
Yeah.
no, you're not supposed to be. God wants more for you. And so that's another lie from the enemy that we adopt because we trust and we believe. So fatigue is huge. But like I said earlier, just because it's common doesn't mean it's normal, and it's not normal for you. So what we do is, we need to find out there are three types of fatigue: physical, mental, and spiritual.
Okay.
But often the root is spiritual fatigue. Because here's the thing.
What is spiritual fatigue? Explain that.
Spiritual fatigue is where you are at the door, at the church doors. Every time the doors are open, you're there, you're serving constantly, you are in this, you have a hard time saying no. Actually, let me go into four mindsets that women put on that I discovered in the last several months that, oh my gosh, this is what I was doing like the majority of my life, because that might help explain it a little bit better. But we wear this perfectionist mindset where we are placing unrealistic expectations on ourselves. And I like to say that I'm a recovering perfectionist, and fortunately therapy helped with that. But that was a big thing. People pleasing, that was another big thing for me. Not setting boundaries, or to really help my self needs. Also having fear of rejection, which is why not setting those boundaries, and needing validation at the same time. That was really big for me too. And then protection, really protecting yourself, controlling the situation. You struggle to be really, what's the word? Vulnerable. You struggle to be vulnerable. You don't delegate well because you feel like it's all on you. And then the push through mindset, which I'll be honest, I still struggle with push through for sure mindset, because you're just getting it done. You're smiling on the outside, but you're dying a little bit on the inside because you are just so tired, but you still keep pushing through. Keeping these mindsets, when we put these on every day, it's keeping us sad, sick, and stuck. And as daughters of the King, he has so much more for us, and he wants us to live that abundant life. He wants us to live in optimal health. And so, spiritually speaking, we are spiritual beings. And a lot of women don't think that God cares about their health. Like they don't think that for whatever reason. And it could be from childhood, whatever they're bringing to the table. They may not think that the Lord needs to be bothered or troubled about how tired they are. And so if we are always saying yes, if we are not putting boundaries around ourselves, then we tend to get burned out. And so this is what I call high functioning fatigue, because we are doing all the things. We're saying yes, we're juggling all the balls, we're wearing a smile, we're putting our own health on the back burner. We're dealing with our family, our job, our career, our businesses, our aging parents, all of these things. And we're just getting depleted. And so what generally tends to happen is we pull away from our source, and that's Jesus. We start pulling away, and we start just feeling so tired that we start numbing out with social media or movies, Netflix, whatever. And that divide just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so being spiritual beings, we need to remember that we need to connect with our source each and every day, because that is going to help us with our mental fatigue, which I put emotional in there as well. And then the physical fatigue.
That makes sense.
Because we could do all these things physically to feel better, but if our spiritual health is not strong, and our mental health is not strong, then it's not going to sustain. It's not going to be long lasting, because we need to invite God into our health. We need to say, God, I need you. What you created me, what does my body need right now? Because we try to take it all on ourselves.
And I think a lot of times us women get in that push through mindset because I don't know, it kind of sounds noble. It sounds like you're so strong, you're dying to yourself. You're sacrificing yourself for the Lord. It sounds noble, but that's how it's a spirit of religion saying those things, because religion sounds noble, but the fruit it produces is death. And so you have to look at what's going to produce life. And God is the God of boundaries. Like God is the only one who's limitless. I have to tell myself this sometimes. Like, Jennalee, stop expecting yourself to do everything. God is the only one who doesn't have limits. You do. So respect your limits, woman. And so
Right.
we have to tell ourselves that sometimes. And even my son the other day, and this is, I think, another way to protect our spiritual health and spiritual energy, is my son was getting kind of sick and he's like, Mom, I'm so tired. I don't have a Sabbath. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, I do school and basketball all week. And then Saturday is the only day I work at Hobby Lobby. And then Sunday I go to church and I stay and I help dad run school of ministry. And I come home and he goes, and then I start all over. I don't have a Sabbath. I just want to rest. And I was like, praise the Lord, my 16-year-old gets it, but that was something the Lord had to deal with me about, because I would work whenever I could find a window, and the Lord was like, no, you have to protect your health. And so out of a principle of honoring the Lord, in fact, there was one point when I was going to be working almost 3 weeks solid based on all the circumstances. And I remember I was having to make a choice between getting paid for my job and working those days or taking a Sabbath. And I remember for a moment I felt like a slave, because I was like, I have to have that money. Like I have to earn that money. I have bills to pay. But then I felt like a slave. And I was like, Lord, you're the one who made the Sabbath. So I'm just going to, in faith, choose not to work those days, and I am going to take a Sabbath, and I'm just going to trust you. And I'm telling you, I chose not to work those 2 days, and the Lord brought me twice in finances what I would have made if I had worked through other situations. And then the boss came back and said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and actually, because I worked at the church, he was like, I'm going to pay you for this day, even if you don't come in, and you can go ahead and take this day off. And so he gave me the day off, and then he paid me for the one day, and then I had already gotten money from the Lord. And I was like, oh, look how the Lord honors the Sabbath. And so I think that's one thing that we forget as women that contributes to our burnout.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you said that, because I was going to mention that in a little bit about mini Sabbaths. Take these mini Sabbaths every day. Yes, we need to. Jesus modeled how to rest. He modeled this for us. And so he knows how important it is. And that's one reason why he cares so much about our well-being, how we are mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. He cares about that. But, starting to take a Sabbath, a full day of Sabbath, can be really daunting, especially if you're that high achiever and you just get things done and you don't ever do that.
Uh-huh.
So one thing that you can try, this is what I did, is I started with 1 hour. I just started with 1 hour. And for me, that was no phone, no TV, no listening to a podcast, no, watching a YouTube video, nothing.
Uh-huh.
Just being outside. And I actually was walking barefoot in the grass, grounding and all of that. And it felt so good. My senses were more heightened. I was able to like really be present with what I was doing. I just started with 1 hour because this was how hard it was for me.
Wow.
Then the next week I went to 4 hours because I was like, that was so good. Let me try 4. That was hard. That was a little bit harder. But, over time, and this is what I mean, build on these little steps to help yourself. It's a form of self-care that is not from the world of self-care is selfish. It's actually quite biblical. Self-care is biblical.
Yeah.
But, just build on that. And then once you feel really good about your weekly Sabbath, you can start start now incorporating 5 minutes of a mini Sabbath each day.
I love it.
Whether it's the beginning of the day, the end of the day. And I talk about, fueling up in the morning and the evening and having like a calming routine at night, a calming bedtime routine. But even like during the day, in the middle of the crazy, slip away if you can and get into a quiet space and then just breathe.
Yeah.
Just deep breathe, because women shallow breathe all day long because we're go, 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 go.
Yeah.
So, but it's just a form of a mini Sabbath where you've got that vertical heart posture up towards the Lord. Like, okay, Lord, you are my everything. I'm bringing everything to you. And it really is life-giving.
That's so good. Okay. I'm so sad that our time is already wrapping, because I feel like we just scratched the surface with what you can share. But what I love from what we've talked about here already is, ladies, do not feel like fatigue is just, this is just how it is. In fact, I want to actually point out, I interviewed Jane Hammond a few weeks ago. I think it's episode 225, somewhere around there, if you guys want to go listen to it. But she talked about how the Lord gave her a vision, that one of the number one ways the enemy gets away with stealing from God's children is he has caused them to believe the lie, this is just how it is. And the truth is, this is not how it is. God says, I have come to give you life and life in abundance. And so if you are not living a life that feels abundant in your health and in any area of your life, that means God has a solution for whatever that situation or that part of your life is. And so with this, what I hear you saying is, ladies, this is not how it is. You can pursue health. There are ways to pursue health. You included so many practical things about getting your minerals up and then helping get certain foods out of your life, out of your house, and how to do it very simply and practically. And then, of course, addressing fatigue. And I feel like we could spend hours talking about the different kinds of fatigue that there are. But at the root, you said usually a spiritual fatigue, and how to create some boundaries and some balance and some wisdom there. What would be anything else that you would like to leave the listeners with that maybe you didn't say yet, but you want to make sure that we get in there?
Yeah, I really want to encourage you that you are your own best advocate for your health. I mean, God has given you these beautiful instincts. Again, it's such an honor to be a woman, and it's such a privilege, but it's also such a responsibility. Yeah. But trust those God-given instincts that he's given you. Trust the Holy Spirit that if something isn't right, keep digging, keep searching, fire your doctor if you have to, like whatever, but you are your own best advocate for your health, and you can recover. Yeah. There's always hope. Don't ever buy into the lie that is around you right now in society and maybe in this season of your life. There's always hope. And seek the Lord first, Matthew 6:33, so that he can guide you down the path, down the direction that is best for you.
Yeah, that's so good. I love it. Well, how can people, obviously we just scratched the surface with this episode. You have so much knowledge in these areas. And of course you have your podcast. Go ahead and remind the listeners how they can connect with you online, including your podcast and any other resources you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Check out the podcast anywhere you listen, Treasured Wellness. And then you can also check out the website as well. Same name, treasuredwellness.com. And of course, I'm on all the socials, but I would love to share my free Foggy and Fatigue Freedom Over 40 blueprint, because often brain fog goes hand in hand with the fatigue that we're feeling. So in this blueprint, I am sharing 3 days of intentional action steps that women can take to start having more energy in a natural way. And there's going to be recipes in there and specific support as well. So you can go to treasuredwellness.com/blueprint to get that.
That sounds amazing. I'll put that link down in the show notes so they can grab it really easily. You guys go get that. That sounds really good. Share it with a friend. Send them the link as well. But thank you so much, Michelle, for coming on here. Even just the little practical tips you sprinkled in there, I think are going to be so helpful for people who just are like, okay, I need to start somewhere. So thank you for that so much. You guys go connect with her online. Make sure you're following at Java with Jen. And you guys, I need to tell you, I published my first book this week. I'm so excited. It's actually a journal, and you, my listeners, have been at the center of my heart in creating this journal. You guys know we talk here about hearing God's voice, and it is a journal designed to give you some tools to hear God's voice better in your daily living, some journal prompts to help you hear God's voice in scripture even better. And I'm so excited. The link is in the show notes if you'd like to go order that. And if you do the pre-order link, then you can go ahead and order a copy that I will be signing and sending you a little note, as well as a couple of extra goodies in there. So grab that link in the show notes and get all that. But you guys, make sure, don't forget to go check out Michelle online at Treasured Wellness. Michelle, thanks so much for being here, and we will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's show. Listen, let's stay connected. Come follow me on Instagram at Java with Jen, where you can follow the latest and say hey. It's a really great way to stay in touch. Many of you have also asked how you can support the show. You can make donations through the Anchor app or on Patreon, or of course by sharing, rating, and reviewing on social media and iTunes as well. Your heartfelt feedback always reminds me why I do this. Also, don't miss our merch store where you can get super cool Java with Jen swag and coffee. Find it at javawithjenmerch.com. Until next time, remember, hearing God's voice is simple, and He wants to be a part of your everyday life. See you next week.